Welcome to the San Gorgonio Chapter Trail Talk Zoom program. My name is John St. Clair, and I'll be your host, your Zoom host for this evening. And Trail Talk is every month on the third Wednesday of the month at 7 p.m. And we cover lots and lots of different topics. Tonight's topic is Joshua Tree National Park tips and trails, with Dave Melton being our speaker. But before we start, I want to set some ground rules. First of all, everybody should be muted, and I think they are. Now they are, except for me and Dave. And we want you to remain muted for the whole program. And if you have questions to ask the speaker, we ask that you put it in the chat section down at the bottom of your screen, at least on my computer. There's a little talking bubble icon with the word chat under it. If you click on that, it opens up a little box, and the default is to send it to everyone, and you can do that. And just type in your question, and I will be keeping track of that, as will Julianne, who hasn't joined us yet, but she called me about 15 minutes ago that she was still on the road and should be home shortly after 7, so she'll be here to help with noticing what questions are asked, and if they're important, we'll relay them to Dave, the speaker, and some of them may not get answered till the end of the program, but all of them will eventually get answered if you put them in the chat section. And this Zoom session is being recorded, as are all of the Trail Talk presentations. And after it's recorded, after it's done, then I upload it to the San Gorgonio Chapter YouTube channel, which that is where all of our Trail Talk sessions are posted. And if you got a reminder email from me last night, the link to the San Gorgonio Chapter YouTube channel was in that email. And if you registered today, then you didn't get that reminder. And I can put it in the chat right now. Let's see if I get the right one here. Sierra Club YouTube, yeah. Okay, so I just put in the link to the San Gorgonio Chapter YouTube channel. I may do that later on because anybody who logs in after I did that isn't going to see it. So those are the ground rules. I also want to mention that Trail Talk was started because our outings program was shut down during the pandemic. And that's no longer the case. We now have the outings program working. And so we are continuing to do the Trail Talk. But if you want to get in the outdoors, take a look at the San Gorgonio Chapter website and the outings section to see what is happening. That's the same place that you register for this event. And I might mention that some of the features from our website are missing because Sierra Club National did an update for our website. And in fact, the web address, the URL, is now different than it used to be. So you might want to change your bookmark for the San Gorgonio Chapter website, because the old one is no longer correct. However, you may be getting there because it's forwarding to you, but that forwarding will not last forever. So you probably want to make sure that you have the current address for the website. So what I'm going to do now is introduce, let's see if I can come over here. I'm going to introduce Julianne Anderson, who is also a member of the Trail Talk Committee. And Julianne will introduce our speaker. So I'll take my spotlight off.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. We are very pleased this evening to have our own Dave Melton as presenter about Joshua Tree tips and trails. Dave has lived in the Coachella Valley since 2011, and Joshua Tree is one of his favorite places to hike. His first ever backpack was a Sierra Club local outing in 1986. He led hikes in the early 90s for the Sierra Club Bay Chapter and has been a hike leader with the San Gorgonio Chapter since 2014, currently serving as Outings Chair for the Tahquitz Group. He's led 5 local and national outing backpacks in Joshua Tree. He also serves on the Tahquitz Group XCOM and the National Outings Quality Improvement Committee. So we are very privileged to have such an experienced member of our chapter here tonight to talk about the wonders of Joshua Tree. And this is, we've previewed this program. It is wonderful. So take it away, Dave.
Okay,
all right.
Put Dave on spotlight. There we go, Dave.
Okay. And I assume I need to share my screen.
Yep.
Okay, that didn't work. Is that working, John?
Yep, it's there.
Okay. Now I've got to move it to my screen. It switched. Oh, well, I'll try to talk. I may be looking away from the screen a little bit because the presentation went on my other monitor rather than the main one here. All right.
I think you already advanced a slide.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, that's the opening slide.
So one other aspect of my bio, which I didn't give them to include, is that besides volunteering for the Sierra Club, I'm also a Joshua Tree volunteer for the national park itself. So I'm in the visitor center every week. And then on a much less regular basis, I also patrol the trails. When I moved to the area and started to think about hiking in Joshua Tree, I found it a little bit hard to get onto the park and where everything was. And I remember talking with Ed Caliendo, who was the Big Bear Outings Chair, about where do I go? Where should I hike? And it's those kinds of questions I'm trying to address in this presentation. So although I'm sort of a park insider, I'm not going to be trying to give you esoteric information, but more just trying to give you a comprehensive look on mainstream information that will help you enjoy the park. So one thing we see right away on the front screen, if you look at it, can you guys see my mouse going around? Are you able to see that, John?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So Joshua Tree, I'm going to start as if you don't know anything whatsoever about the park. So Joshua Tree is north of the Coachella Valley, north of Palm Springs, above Interstate 10, and bordered on the north by Highway 62. Most of the hikes, most of the infrastructure and usage of the park is over here on the west end. There's also some activity at the southern end here near Cottonwood or Lost Palms Oasis. The eastern area of the park is largely just pretty much just wilderness, you know, for the animals and for the wildlife. If we look at the history of Joshua Tree, originally it was homeland for 4 of the Native American tribes, for the Serrano, Shemiwevi, and Cahuilla. Those were resident tribes. And the Mojave tribe used the area, but it's my understanding is they weren't resident there. The new visitor center in 29 Palms has extensive displays on the Native American history. So I'm going to jump ahead here. So the new visitor center is over in this area. So there's going to be some updates in this presentation, things you might not have known. Previously, with the visitor center by park headquarters was co-located with it, the Oasis Visitor Center, but now it's moved slightly off a few blocks away, and it's now called the Joshua Tree National Park Visitor Center. And it's there that they have extensive displays on the Native American history. Around 1890, there started to be mining activity and ranching and homesteading activity in the park. And the mining activity continued in a big way till about 1915, and it faded away and it came back in the 30s for gold mining. The ranching and homesteading sort of persisted. Now you might be wondering, how did anyone ever ranch in Joshua Tree? Well, it turns out that the early part of the 1900s was sort of a bubble of rainfall throughout the West, more that came before in the 1800s and certainly more than we get now. And Joshua Tree would have gotten about 10 inches of rain a year. And that whole system of dams we have through the West, Glen Canyon and so forth, that was all built thinking that that amount of rainfall was what the West normally got. And that's why we have sort of underutilized reservoirs, which is a whole another discussion. Because of that history of homesteading and ranching, there were buildings built in Joshua Tree. There's one here. This is actually the Lost Horse Ranger Station, which was, a residence that existed within the national park. This upper slide shows, it's a rather green slide for Joshua Tree. It's obviously in the spring and meant to evoke kind of the rainfall that was in the park, in 1920s, 1930. So they're in holdings within the park to this day. The Mojave Desert Land Trust, or MDLT, as I've abbreviated it in the presentation, has been involved in buying out these in holdings. They've also been buying land on the northern boundary of Joshua Tree. And one of their goals is to prevent the cities of Yucca Valley and Joshua Tree from growing together. So they have been buying land right in this area between those two cities to try to maintain a corridor for wildlife and plant migration with global warming. And their scope of interest is broad, but they're actually a very local organization. Their headquarters right here, right about where I've got the cursor, right there on Highway 62. In 1913, the last of the Native American families gave up living in the Joshua Tree area. It's not really a very pretty story of how the Native Americans were treated, and left for the reservation. And the last place they lived was here at the Oasis of Mara, which is by park headquarters. It's still an oasis. It's not as green as it used to be because of groundwater pumping, but it is an interesting historical site. That was the largest and the living area that lasted the longest, and there are historical interpretive signs there. So in 1936, Franklin Delano Roosevelt established Joshua Tree as a national monument. And that was a group effort, but one person was definitely a key player, and that was Minerva Hoyt, who was like a socialite from Pasadena. And there's several park features are named after her. There's the Minerva Hoyt Trail here, and also Minerva Hoyt Peak. So in 1950, the Eagle Mountain area was removed from Joshua Tree to make an iron mine, and it was supposed to be returned when the mine was shut down. The mine is shut down. It's never been returned. And it's almost like a shadowy kind of strange area. It's located right here. You can see does look like a bite was taken out of the park. And there's been there's been a number of proposals for what to do with that. One proposal has been to make a pumped storage area, to use two different mine pits, one above the other, to pump water up during the day when there's solar power available, and let water run down to make power during the evening. So pump storage obviously has some advantages to it, but it's probably not the right place to do it because there's not that much groundwater. Where are they going to get all this water for this storage? And then in moving it around like this, it's going to evaporate, and it's going to attract more non-native wildlife, which tends to prey on the desert tortoises. In 1994, the Desert Protection Act made Joshua Tree and Death Valley into national parks. It expanded Joshua Tree and established the Mojave National Preserve, which is up to the north of Joshua Tree. And recently departed Senator Dianne Feinstein was the big big push behind the Desert Protection Act, although again, a team effort that the Sierra Club Desert Committee was and other conservation organizations were very involved in. So I've got a partial park map pulled up. This shows the core area of the park, the biggest or the busiest area of the park. And I'm going to walk through some of those features. We have the Joshua Tree Visitor Center here, more toward the west side of the park. Most of the road access is through the north side of the park. And the one exception to that is the Cottonwood Visitor Center and this road access through the southern area of the park. But most of the road access is here off of the north. So we've got the Joshua Tree Visitor Center, and then we have the Joshua Tree National Park Visitor Center. And this continues somewhat of a tradition of things in Joshua Tree having somewhat jumbled names. The Joshua Tree Visitor Center is the busiest because it's closest to Los Angeles, and most of the visitors enter the park through the west entrance station. Now notice this visitor center is outside the park, which is a little bit unusual. In most parks, from the visitor center, you probably have a trail and you could go hiking, but the visitor center is outside the park. That's also the case for the Joshua Tree National Park Visitor Center. Joshua Tree itself is all wilderness and backcountry. There's no hotels, gas stations, no services whatsoever in the park. So one good thing about the visitor center being out in town is when I inform visitors of that and they need to get something, some food or some gas, it's nearby. To give you a sense of scale of the park, to drive from the Joshua Tree Visitor Center through the park on the main road back out to park headquarters takes an hour. It's about 32 miles. The west entrance station has bathrooms, so it has some facilities there. The plan is to move that entrance station into the park so that they can expand the road and have more lanes of visitors to get into the park. And that entrance station only takes credit cards at this point. It no longer takes cash. If you want to buy a park pass or park entrance with cash, you'll need to do that at one of the visitor centers. The north entrance is over here, and you might ask why it's not called the east entrance. Maybe it's north entrance in relation to down at Cottonwood, which might be thought of as the southern entrance perhaps, but it's the north entrance station, and it does not have any services there at all. However, it's the less busy entrance station, so during peak season, it could be the right way to enter the park and not have a backup getting into the park. The goal of moving the west entrance station into the park and expanding the lanes there is to remove that backup that we have during peak season. On the park map, a red line means that that is a paved road. So the Park Boulevard here is a paved road. All the paved roads in Joshua Tree are two-way and in good condition. So unlike some national parks where they have one-way loops where once you started, you're committed for an hour drive, in Joshua Tree, you can always backtrack. Gray on the map means that these are dirt roads here, like Queen Valley Road or Geology Tour Road. Some of the dirt roads are shown more traditionally like you'd see them on a regular map with dashed lines. Cell coverage in the park is limited. There is a tower over in this general area in the Black Rock area, and you get some service over in this area of the park. Otherwise, you're not going to get cell coverage. There is an emergency phone here in a key core area of the park where there's a lot of visitors. At Intersection Rock, there's a little phone symbol. That phone goes directly to San Bernardino Dispatch, which is the dispatcher for the park emergency services. Most of the trails, or the trails shown on the map, are intended to be straightforward trails. Some of them might still have a few navigational challenges, but in general, those are going to be straightforward trails. So I'm going to talk about some of the trails on the map, not all of them, because we just won't have enough time. And then I will talk about some other trails that are not on the park map because they're not as straightforward. The only place you can park a car overnight in Joshua Tree is at a campground or at a backcountry board. So these blue circles with the white letter B in them, those are backcountry boards. That's where you can leave a car overnight. So if you're thinking of a backpack trip, maybe you say, hey, I want to go hike, I'm going to want to backpack the North View Trail. You're not going to be able to park your car there. You're going to have to park it some other place. So that aspect of Joshua Tree somewhat constrains backpacking planning. Another thing to note is that some areas of the park are outside the paid area, such as the Black Rock Nature Center, which is over here, Indian Cove area, and the 49 Palms Oasis, and also the Oasis of Mara. So those are areas that are outside the paid area. So if you're coming back from Las Vegas and you just have an hour to spend in the park, some of these areas that perhaps don't tie you up at a line at the entrance station in peak season could be good options. Continuing on with basic park information, the park does not close. So you're welcome to stay till midnight for stargazing. You're welcome to come at 5 in the morning during the hot season or busy season to get into the park while it's cool or there are fewer visitors. If you have an annual pass or a senior pass, we don't ask you to display it in the park. We don't give you anything to stick in the windshield. The park access is just controlled at the entrance stations. You do not want to display your pass in the summer because it might get soft or even melt. You can plan for long hikes in Joshua Tree from November to April. And the limitation there is the heat. So if I'm scheduling a hike for the Sierra Club, that's the window where I schedule them. You might still get a good hike in late September or October because the weather might be good that particular day, but you can't plan a month ahead of time to hike in that period because you've got to see what the weather is like. None of the campgrounds in the center core area of the park have water. There's no piped water anywhere in the inside of the park. That's one thing to keep in mind. And then Bell, White Tank, and Hidden Valley, not labeled, Hidden Valley where I've got my cursor, Bell and White Tank, those 3 campgrounds are first come, first served. And that is maintained year round now. The other campgrounds, Ryan Mountain, Black Rock, for example, those are all on the reservation system, recreation.gov. And again, that's year round. So you might remember if you've camped in Joshua Tree before that it changed a lot depending on the season. If in the summer, hey, we don't have that many visitors, we'll just make everything first come, first served. And they decided that was too hard to manage. So now the system is just maintained year round. If you want to come into the park and camp, there's no cell service in most areas of the park. You'll need to make a decision and go to recreation.gov with your cell phone while you have cell signal and then enter the park, or alternatively, go into the park, decide where you want to be, and then go outside the park, get cell signal, and make your reservation. And again, the first come, first serve really only works outside of peak season. Hidden Valley is, of the 3 first come, first serve campgrounds, Hidden Valley is the busiest. It's the favorite of the rock climbers, and that's what drives that. Bell and White Tank are much quieter campgrounds. So if you want quiet, meditation, peace, then Bell and White Tank are good places to be. And finally, for this slide, mountain bikes and dogs can go where cars can go, which means not on trails. The dirt roads are okay. Many of our dirt roads are pretty quiet. So if you have a dog and you want to take a dog into Joshua Tree, the best dirt road is this one right here that I'm indicating with the cursor between the Boy Scout Trail and Hemingway or Hidden Valley. This dirt road is the only dirt road that leaves on the right. It has a bathroom and a parking lot right at the beginning. So it's a noticeable dirt road, and that's the prettiest dirt road we have. The Geology Tour Road tends to be a busy road. People drive fast on that one, so they're not a good place to walk your dog. But Queen Valley Road, Bighorn Pass Road, those are all viable. So this slide shows Skull Rock on the weekend in busy season. So Skull Rock is over here on the map, on the bigger park map. It would be your Zoom squares are covering it. So I'm roughly going to indicate in this area here. And Joshua Tree got a sudden spike in visitation about 2016, 2017. I think it became an internet thing. And if you look at the graph of park visitation, it just turned and went straight up. It went up like 60% from one year to the next. And then it's leveled off and somewhat remained at the 3 million visitors per year. But the park infrastructure really isn't set up to accommodate that many visitors in peak season. This last Monday, I was working the visitor center. All the popular parking lots filled, and we were just directing people to wherever they could park was their new favorite hiking area. And that's because Monday was Martin Luther King holiday, and it was also a day you could enter the park without paying. It was a fee-free day, and we were very busy. Keys View Road may also be closed on the weekend. Keys View is the highest point you can drive to in the park. It's a popular overlook, and it's become an internet thing to go there to watch the sunset. The sunset is actually beautiful throughout the park. There's no need to go to Keys View, but it's an internet thing, and many people try to go there. And then the rangers will be at the beginning of the road, turning traffic back. One way to deal with the busyness of the park is to hike obscure trails. As you might suspect, some vast number of the visitors, probably over 90%, are going to all the same places. And as a more experienced hiker, able to manage longer trails or trails that require some navigational skills, you have many more choices. The park doesn't normally get really busy till about 10 in the morning. So if you come early, you can work around the busyness. And fall or weekdays during busy season are good times to visit. So let's look at some resources for learning about Joshua Tree. The park webpage has been expanded quite a bit and actually is really a treasure trove of good information. And one of those treasure troves is this URL here, which gives you a list of our hikes, moderate hikes, strenuous hikes. And there's a separate one I didn't show for easy hikes. So we have guides to the hikes with some descriptions of them. If a hike is on this list, it is intended to be a straightforward hike. Other resources one is this Patty Furbish book, which although it dates from 2005 is remarkably current. I'll point out a few things in the presentation where it's not current. Anyway, in any way that it's not current, it tells you a trail is gnarlier than it is today. So any lack of currency is on the safe side. The book also has maps inside. It's not the easiest book to get a hold of. However, it's freely available at the visitor centers. And it has legacy pricing, $14.95. You can hardly get a burrito and Coke for that. So that's a good option. We have other books at the visitor centers as well. And a really good resource is on the park webpage at this link. They have posted every 7.5-minute topo map for the park. So these are PDF files. They're not necessarily geo-referenced on your phone. However, I think it's still a rich resource to investigate the trails on a map that you can pull up on your screen. You can zoom in on, figure out what your plan is. And then there's other resources you can use for your phone. Now, the reason I've been talking about, these hikes are straightforward if they're on the park map, if they're on our list, is that the National Geographic map, which is really your best resource for a big park-wide map, shows some trails that are routes rather than trails. So you could pull open that map, see a trail, decide you're going to go hike it and find, oh, it's a route. I'm now cross country. And maybe you were planning to be back in an hour and now you're doing cross country navigation. So that is a that is a definite concern. For example, the hike from Quail Springs to Johnny Lane Canyon is straightforward till you get to the sign where it says unmarked trail ahead, no trail signs, no trail maintenance. And that through Johnny Lane Canyon after the sign, the National Geographic map shows it as a regular trail. So this is why those resources on the park webpage can be important, or you're welcome to call me and ask if a certain trail is straightforward or not. Joshua Tree in general is pretty easy to explore. There are some tricky spots, but in general, you know, you can safely explore there, but you have to know that that needs to be intentional. If you're going to go exploring, great, that's probably going to work out really good. But start early so you have enough daylight. If it's going to be in a warmer season, get an early start so you avoid the heat. The National Park Service app has been, the National Park Service has been improving the app on an ongoing basis. And now it really has some good resources on it. Because there is not cell service in the park, if you pull up the National Park Service app and you want to make sure you've got it saved for offline use. So it does have trails in it, as do other apps like All Trails, Gaia GPS, even Google Maps. All of these are now showing park trails. However, you really have to be careful. You truly do have it downloaded onto your phone before you really commit to, I'm really going to rely on this particular GPS to navigate me to where I want to be, that the information is really there on your phone, and that also you're able to show it. This circles back to what I said about it's great to have those topo maps. You know, if you study the topo map on your computer at home and you have a good idea of where you're going, then if you've got issues with your GPS, you're not hopeless or helpless. You already basically knew where you were going, and the GPS was really just sort of a little bit of a assist. Also, if you use those apps for navigation, you're frequently going to have to get the premium version. This comes up a lot in my work at the visitor center. People say, I've got all trails. I point out they're not going to have it in the park unless they have the premium version, and quite frequently they don't. So I've been alluding to needing navigational sophistication and moxie. What's that about? Well, one of the things in several things happen in Joshua Tree. One is it's fairly open country. There are other places you might hike. Section B of the Pacific Crest Trail right here south of the Coachella Valley. Those trails are super brushy. You can't get off that trail when you want to find a place to use the bathroom. There's no way you're getting off that trail. Where Joshua Tree has wide open spots. We have washes that cross our trails, and sometimes the trail just becomes the wash. It enters the wash. So here's an example of a trail through a wash. This is on the Boy Scout Trail. And then there's a little sign here. I don't know if it showed up really well, the little arrow sign. That's guiding you that you need to make a turn out of that wash. So this is a fairly clear indication, but you do have to have your head, you have to be alert to the idea that if you're in a wash, are you going to cross the wash? Are you entering the wash? If you do enter the wash, when are you leaving? Another thing to be aware of with Joshua Tree is that it can be cold in the park. Overnight temps could be below freezing. It was 26 degrees at night last week at Jumbo Rocks Campground. So even if you're just out for a day hike, bring enough layers in case you get delayed returning or things really go south, you end up spending the night out. In the shoulder seasons, if you're hiking in the spring or the fall, bring more water than you think you'll need. Don't try to say, I'm bringing exactly the right amount of water. Perfect. I got back to my car and had no water left. No, perfect is I got back to my car and had leftover water. And then in the summer, we got other places, other good options, Idlewild, Big Bear. So don't try to hike in the park in the summer. Another good thing is to learn the park landmarks. Like here in this picture, I've got Oyster Bar, which is near Ryan Mountain. That's signed from the road. This little formation on Ryan Mountain can be seen from a lot of places in the park, surprisingly. So that's a good orientation piece. If you get turned around, you don't have a compass, it's an overcast day, I don't know, which way's north, which way south? I got turned around. Learning park landmarks such as Oyster Bar can be a big help. Another landmark you can sometimes see would be San Gorgonio or San Jacinto. If you see a big tall mountain with snow on it, it's probably one of those. That's probably west. Okay, let's talk about some of the hikes in Joshua Tree. I'm going to start with some easier hikes that are only 1 mile kind of hikes. And you might say, I'm not driving all the way to Joshua Tree for a 1 mile hike, but consider bringing your non-hiking friends to Joshua Tree. We want to make these national parks relevant to the wider population, not just a hardcore hiker. So I'm going to run through some of these easier hikes. So Cap Rock is basically our easiest hike. It's shown here on the map. It's at the intersection of Park Boulevard and the Keys View Road. It's 0.4 miles. It's completely flat. It's shown here in the, this is Cap Rock. It's got a little rock on top of a larger rock. This is also a park landmark that you can learn to spot. So the most popular hike is at Hidden Valley over here at the picnicking area, not at the campground of the same name. That's a 1 mile loop hike. I forgot to include that. Has a nice picnic area. It has a short lollipop. It's a lollipop loop with a short handle. There's already a up and down, even in that very short handle, just 80 yards from the parking lot. If your guests can do the handle, they can probably do the whole thing. Go counterclockwise because the next hardest thing will come up sooner if you go counterclockwise. And Hidden Valley is great for kids. Really, Joshua Tree is a great park for kids anywhere, but Hidden Valley is a great hike for kids. Has lots of rock formations. Bring your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, your own kids. They want something they can climb. So Barker Dam. Barker Dam is another 1 mile lollipop loop hike that's very popular. The dam no longer holds water. It's gotten old and creaky. And so that, unfortunately, we don't have the lake there as an attraction. Sometimes folks think that you have to drive on dirt to get there. The road there is red, which means it's paved. Overflow parking sometimes is an Echo T that does have a short dirt road. Any car can do it. But starting from Echo T is an interesting hike. It's pretty, but it definitely, it pretty much doubles the hike, maybe even more than doubles. So it becomes no longer an easy hike, perhaps. Another area of interesting hikes is in the Split Rock, Skull Rock area. So Skull Rock is here. We saw that earlier when I showed you the slide of an area with a whole bunch of people. Split Rock is over here. There is a whole network of trails here, about 5 miles of trails, and all of these trails connect. So Split Rock Loop by itself is 2.4 miles. Then there's the Discovery Trail Loop, which is 0.7 miles. That's signed with interpretive signs oriented toward kids. And then there's the Campground Loop over here. And part of the Campground Loop is made with the Campground Road. We have interpretive signs at most of the trailheads, not actually at Split Rock, but most of the starting points for these trails have a big aluminum sign with a map engraved on it. And one cool thing about this area is you have people of differing abilities, small kids, maybe 13-year-old kids, and some want to do a longer hike, some want to do a shorter hike. You can access, with all these options, you can satisfy everyone. Now here, one of my favorite hikes is the Maze Loop. It was added to the park map in September, and the trail delineation was improved at that time accordingly so that it could be considered a straightforward hike. It has a dirt parking lot 1.5 miles after the west entrance. The parking lot's on the left side, same side of the road as the trails. It is not signed. It holds 4 to 5 cars. And then overflow parking is on the dirt road, on the dirt shoulder of the road. If you park on the shoulder, don't drive on any plants. The outer loop is about 7.3 miles with an 850-foot elevation change. Now, I mentioned earlier, Joshua Tree tends to have names that are not always helpful. One thing that's not helpful here is we have 3 trails leaving from the same parking lot that have north in the name. So if you only remember it's that north trail, you could end up on a nice trail, but not the one you intended to be on. For example, on the trail sign here, this is a good example of one of our trail signs that has a map on it. So I don't know if you can clearly see that, but there's a map here. And it tells you you're starting the North View Trail, but it also points to the North Canyon Trail, which was one of those other north trails. So to do this hike, you're looking for the North View Trail, which is the third one you'll come to, all within about 150 yards of the trailhead. The North View Trail is very scenic. It has most of the elevation change. Next most scenic is the window loop down here at the bottom, which they did not include for reasons I don't know. The Maze Loop cutoff here is a scenic, good trail. Down below here is a broad wash, which is actually scenic because there are hills on both sides of it. However, it is a sort of a boring trail to hike because it's like arrow straight wash with no up or down or turns or anything. A short loop option would be just to do the North View and the Maze Loop cutoff. And this hike works totally well, either counterclockwise or clockwise. Another trail they added to the park map is the Bigfoot Panorama Loop. And again, they did some improved delineation in this area. However, this is probably the sketchiest hike that they've actually put on the park map. The signage is just adequate. Let me first talk about the trailhead, then I'll revisit that. The trailhead is the first large paved pullout on the right. It's about 2 miles from the visitor center. My understanding is they're planning to sign this parking. But at this point, it's just an unsigned long pullout, about 70 yards long. You'll know you're in the right spot if you get to a signboard with an Edward Abbey quote. And the Creosote Trail, which leaves from the parking lot, does have this sign here. It is important or better to do this loop counterclockwise. And the reason is much of the Bigfoot Trail is in a wash. At times the sand can be a little soft. If you're going downhill through that soft sand, you won't even notice that it's soft. If you're trying to go uphill, it's a bit of a slog. When you take this trail, there's going to be a couple of times you're going to be tempted to think, I must be in the wrong spot. One of those is the trail gets really close to the road. Don't let that worry you. Just carry on. And that's the rule here in this Bigfoot Trail. Just carry on. Just trust your instincts. And eventually you'll get to a few signs that give you some encouragement that, yes, you are in the right spot. The trail briefly joins the Quail Wash. The only sign you get is one of those little arrow signs that I showed earlier when I was talking about a wash. And then you get to the Panorama Trail very quickly, like in 60 yards. And it has a very clear sign, like similar to the Creosote Trail sign here. And then the Panorama Trail is completely well signed. No issues once you get onto the Panorama Trail. Very straightforward to get back to your start point. If you get to an old fence in the wash, you miss the intersection, go back. This is harder than the Maze Loop. I didn't track down the miles and the elevation gain, but it's about 4 hours. All right, the Boy Scout Trail. So the Boy Scout Trail goes from Indian Cove, outside the paid area of the park, to inside the paid area of the park on Park Boulevard. On the map, they show in more broad letters or bigger letters, Keys West, but on the road, it's signed Boy Scout Trail. It's 8 miles long if you're going southbound, you'll be going uphill. It's a 1,500-foot climb and a 300-foot descent. The prettiest area of this hike is the middle 4 miles. So this works best as a shuttle hike. Either go with some friends, bring 2 vehicles, or frequently we offer this hike, and you can do it that way. The beginning of the hike from Indian Cove starts off flat. You do see some rock formations a little bit in the distance, and there's an agglomeration of pencil cholla, which is interesting here here by Indian Cove. But otherwise, it's like very straight, not super interesting trail. Then, though, you get to an interesting canyon. I showed you one piece of that canyon earlier, and here's another piece of it. So the middle 4 miles is interesting. If anyone is not a solid hiker, though, they're likely to have trouble on some steep, loose switchbacks. Here, I've had 2 different hikes. I've had people run into trouble on these switchbacks. I personally don't think they're hard. If you're a regular hiker, you won't think they're hard. But I had to carry someone's pack down down these switchbacks one time, and another time a person basically collapsed. So anyone who's not a solid hiker should not do this hike. The Willow Hole Trail is also starts or shares part of the Boy Scout Trail. Then it branches off. It's 7 miles out and back with very flat. The intersection with the Boy Scout Trail is completely clear, signed. I mentioned that the middle 4 miles of the Boy Scout Trail are the prettiest. So the start of the Boy Scout Trail is a little bit ordinary, but I tell people this hike gets prettier with every step. So either do the whole thing or save it for another day when you've got the whole day, or it's not going to be too hot in the afternoon. There's a minor rocky area about a half mile from the end. And the first time I did this hike, I had some people with me who were not strong hikers. And I said, oh, this is where we turn around. Later, I went back and I found that rocky area is like 30 or 40 yards. No big deal. So don't turn around there. Don't let that discourage you. Just keep on going till the end. And yet end up in like a big amphitheater kind of thing surrounded by rocks. It's cool. It's pretty. Lost Horse Mine is a different kind of hike. The ones we've talked about so far show you the rocky Joshua Tree country, but I mentioned all that cultural history, the mining, the ranching. Lost Horse Mine is a mine hike. It's trailed all the way around now. Some earlier references might have alluded to some cross country, but it's totally trailed. There's a dirt road to the trailhead. Any car can do it. However, the trailhead is small. So if you're going to do this hike, get there early so you make sure you can park. Most folks just go to the mine and back. That's through this big, broad area here with hiking on the old wagon road to the mine. This area of the hike, the beginning of the hike, has nice views back to the west. You will see San Gorgonio and San Jacinto, those landmarks I referenced. You'll see to the north. The mine is super interesting. There's a big chunk of it above ground. You can see the mine over here. It's hard to pick out on this picture, but it's there. And even if you're just planning to go to the mine and go back, it's worthwhile to continue on a little bit to the ridge beyond the mine, because then you get nice views out to the east. You get to see Malapai Hill and some isolated rock formations that dot the area out there. After the mine, the trail becomes single track. So instead of this nice broad road, it's more of a narrower, rockier trail. You might want to, if you use a hiking pole, you would want one for the middle third of that hike. And then the last third of the hike is just a stroll through a valley. Very, very easy. Here are some shorter, quieter hikes. So these could still be, at least Lucky Boy Loop could be an option to take. It's an easy hike, an option to take your non-hiking friends as long as you're there to navigate them. So Contact Mine is also a hike that was added to the park map maybe 2 years ago, roughly. The upgrade of the delineation of it. The reason it wasn't on the park map is it starts off in a big broad wash. And what they've done is they've added arrow signs through the wash to delineate it. Later, the trail becomes single track. It leaves from the right side of the wash and it goes all the way to the mine. No cross country required anymore. At the end of the trail, you have old mining equipment and some covered mine entrances. 3.7 miles round trip, 660 foot climb and descent. So short, but does have a little bit of climb to it. Lucky Boy Loop is not mentioned anywhere in the park resources, but the trail is signed both at Pine City here. There are 3 trails that leave from Pine City. On the park map, they show the clear one, the obvious one that just goes to the north. Relatively flat trail, still might be worthwhile. Sometimes you find wildlife down there because it's a quiet trail. But we're talking about the Lucky Boy Loop, which again is signed at both ends. So the other trailhead for Lucky Boy Loop is halfway up this road, about 3.5 miles, quite flat. There's a spur that leaves from the loop and takes you till the Elton mine. There's not that much to see from the mine, but you do also there get an overlook. You might get cell signal there. And so it's nice because it has a view. Many of the areas in Joshua Tree don't really have a view off into the distance, but it does. And you can also connect this with the split rock loop that I mentioned earlier back in the trails in this area. You can see Elton Mine here. You can actually connect these. There's a bit of a use trail I myself have not ever done it. I would like to do that, but haven't done it. I would consider it sketchy, but doable, but plan for a little bit of steep slope or perhaps a tiny bit of route finding. Stubby Springs is a long hike. It's 12 miles plus or minus 1,800 feet. It leaves from the Juniper Flat area. They don't show it on the park map, and they shouldn't. But here I've sort of penciled it in yellow. Stubby Springs is not really a spring. It's more of a seep, which is a bit of a theme in Joshua Tree, with drought, increased groundwater pumping and so forth. Some of the springs are more of a seep. In the vicinity of the spring, you will see animal bones and some remnants of human habitation. The Fan Canyon overlook is super cool, sort of like Keys View, but you have it to yourself. The trail, this hike is trailed all the way around, but it does require some navigational moxie to make sure you stay on the trail. One thing that is not shown even on this topo is that you actually link to a dirt road. They have some resistance to showing this dirt road on maps. I don't know why. It leaves some juniper flats just like the trail does. Dave Newman tells me, some of you may or may not know Dave. He's a hike leader. He as well was a park volunteer before leaving the area. And this dirt road goes from Juniper Flats and gets actually sort of close to Quail, blanking out on the name. Is it Quail Mountain? Mm-hmm. And I believe that was put in to help fight a fire. But in any event, that road is there, and you actually come back on a little segment of that road, and then you rejoin the main hiking trail, or you can just take the dirt road all the way back to the trailhead. I've done it both ways. This area back here by Stubby Spring, I really like it. It's really beautiful. You don't see any landmarks in the distance, so it can be a little bit disorienting. So if you ever bring a compass on a hike, this would be one of the times you might want to do that in case it's an overcast day. So Black Rock is the super interesting area of the park. It's separated from the main area. It has all the same things the core area does, but in different proportion. Fewer rocks, fewer Joshua trees, but it's greener with more oak trees and pinyon juniper. In the core area of the park, the road takes you right to where the scenic stuff is. Hidden Valley is a 1 mile loop. That's all you need because the road takes you there. In Black Rock, the road barely gets you into the park and stops. And then you're left to hike to all the scenic things. So that's why I said the hikes are generally longer. But there is just a cornucopia of trails over here. Many, many interesting trails. The ones that are shown in the more faint print are less established. The ones that are shown in darker print are completely established here. So anything on this map that's showing in dark print I've done, and it's all solid. Cottonwood area, down at the southern area of the park. This is a lower elevation area, about 2,000 feet, best done in the winter. This area used to confuse me because I used to hear there was an oasis at the end of the trail. Then I heard there's the oasis at the beginning of the trail. Didn't make sense to me till I started volunteering in the park and learned, oh, there's an oasis on both ends of the trail. So it's a twofer. It's an 8 mile round trip with 950 feet of gain and loss. The trail stops before you actually get to the Lost Palms Oasis, but people still go down to it, and it's a little bit braided. If you hike there, try not to add to the braiding, pick an existing route and go with that. And the Lost Palms Oasis is a day use area, and that's going to lead us into backpacking in Joshua Tree. This will be my last slide. So backpacking in Joshua Tree is great. It's just a beautiful place to be on a spring evening, a beautiful place to watch the sunset and hang out in the park. The wilderness permit system has changed. If you were used to the yellow tag system, that is gone. And now you make a reservation on recreation.gov, just as you would for any wilderness permit in the Sierra Nevada. There is a permit office in the park, and in theory, you could just show up at the permit office. It's part of park headquarters and get issued a permit on the same day in person. However, I would not count on that office being staffed. If they're there, great. If you have any issue with your permit, but I would get one on recreation.gov. I would plan ahead. In general, the permits are freely available. However, the camping on the Boy Scout Trail is limited to designated sites. You cannot park, cannot camp where you want to, has to be in a designated site. They have targeted group sites, group sizes for those sites, and those are in great demand because there's a lot of commercial trips. REI runs trips on the Boy Scout Trail. You can reserve 6 months in advance, and if you want a permit on the Boy Scout Trail, I suggest you do it 6 months exactly. That morning, 7:01 a.m., you need to be on there to get the permit. If you just want to backpack through the Boy Scout Trail but not camp there, you can still do that. It's freely available to backpack through. Only camping is subject to the quota. Pine City is also limited. I talked about Pine City back, where was it? When we talked about, well, I won't take time to find it, but there's really nowhere to go in Pine City. You go in 2 miles and you're done. So most of us, if we're doing a backpack trip, unless we're taking our grandkids out, we're not gonna go there because we want to be part of a larger trail systems. It's also limited, but not really a big limitation. You can only have 2 cars on a permit. So if you have a group size of 7 and you're bringing 3 cars, you're going to need 2 permits, 2 cars per permit only. Max group size is 12. I alluded to earlier, you have to park at a backcountry board. Again, it can be cold at night. If you're going backpacking in February in Joshua Tree, sun's going to be down at 6 and it's going to get cold early. So not only do you have to think about how cold it is for the lowest temperature during the night, it's going to get cold early as well. The new permit system has freed up food and water caching. So before it sort of frowned on it, talked about 24 hours, they really didn't want you caching food and water in the old system. Now they are allowing it. Still, the best way to cache food and water, if it works for your trip, is in your car trunk. Even if I'm putting food in a car, I put it in a rat sack or a bear can. Rodents in cars are really not a problem in Joshua Tree, but I don't want them to be. So it's best just to keep them from ever getting to food in your car, and that way they won't think of cars as a food source. You do need to label your water containers. If I see old unlabeled water containers in the park, part of my duties when I'm roving trails is I will remove them. And so unlabeled water containers, half-used water containers are subject to removal. So label those. If you leave your water container at a super popular spot like Juniper Flats, we now have an issue of wildlife breaking into water containers. So if you're going to leave water at Juniper Flats, it's probably best to hide it a couple 100 yards away, a quarter mile away, hike it in away from the parking lot. If you're hiding bear cans with food, you could consider putting your water inside a bear can. I don't think it's a major issue, but we're starting to be aware of it. The park webpage does talk about ravens pecking into water containers. The regulations for where you can camp have not gotten any stricter, but here they are. You need to be 1 mile from a trailhead. We're looking for actual backpacking, not glorified car camping. A half mile from any road. It used to be a mile, but now it's half mile from any road. And 200 feet from the trail. It used to be 500 feet, but tents really stand out in Joshua Tree because they're not behind a tree like they might be in the Sierra Nevada. So if you can get further off the trail or you can get behind a big juniper bush, that is better. All right, that's it for the formal presentation. I pretty much sucked up the whole hour. John, do we have time for questions?
Yes, sure do.
Yeah, we have quite a few, Dave. So let's dive in. Let's see. First of all, can you talk about the pros and cons of various car campgrounds? If people want to go with a group of car campers, what do you recommend? What do you recommend for kind of high spring, March, April? bearing in mind that it can be kind of windy. So where are some of the best car camp areas?
I think the best car camp area in season is just going to be where you can get a spot. Um,
Yeah.
And for that reason, my experience in car camping the park has largely been Indian Cove or Black Rock, because those are easier places to get a site. I've been at Jumbo Rocks once. It was a nice place to camp. You're part of that Split Rock Discovery trail system. You can hike right from the campground, which is good. From Ryan, you can also hike from the campground. You've got choices there. I've never camped at Ryan, so I'm afraid I'm not the best expert on car camping.
Okay. No problem. Um, you were mentioning about going on some more obscure trails to kind of avoid crowds. Can you give us some examples of your recommendations?
Sure. So the Panorama Trail, Bigfoot Trail system was one of those. The Maze is one of those. Um, Lucky Boy Loop, which was over here, was a good example. Although it's short, contact mine, you'll have the place completely to yourself, and maybe you can combine that with Lucky Boy Loop. So take 2 shorter hikes and make a day out of it by combining those obscure trails. Ryan Ranch is also a fun hike, not that many people go to. The parking is a pullout on the side of the road. The trails here are braided because people come over from the campground. Ryan Ranch is an old adobe that has been preserved in a state of arrested decay. I mentioned the trails are braided. However, if you leave from Park Boulevard, there's a very prominent little hill with a very prominent outcropping on the top, and that's a landmark. So note that outcropping, have fun wandering around, and then when it's time to go back, spot that outcropping. That'll be your beacon. Follow whatever trail you can find. There'll be more than enough because they're braided, and just work your way back toward your car using that rock as a landmark.
Next question. Wildlife wildlife viewing opportunities. And Dave and everyone, I wanted to share with you, I had the greatest conversation at work today. A colleague of mine had taken her daughter out to Joshua Tree in the evening for stargazing, and there were bats, and her daughter said, "What are all these birds?" She said, "No, honey, those are bats." And her daughter was just enchanted and was talking about bats for days. So can you
Cool.
tell us about good both daytime and nocturnal wildlife viewing?
Okay. Some good places to go for wildlife viewing could be the Big Trees Trail here. You can pick that up from the California Riding and Hiking Trail. So I moved my mouse probably too quickly. Here on the Big Trees Trail, this does not get a lot of use, and pick it up from either Ryan Ranch area or from Juniper Flats or from Lost Horse Mine. That's fairly lightly used. I mentioned, I can't quite point to it perfectly because again, the way things are on my screen, but from Pine City is a relatively lightly used trail. If you have a Subaru or a 4x4 vehicle, going into the Covington Flat area gets you way away from anyone. So this road tends to get hammered when it rains, and at times you could drive any sedan on this road, and at time you need a Subaru or a Jeep. Right now you need a Subaru. However, you can come down this road and park here at the Covington picnic area. You can hike this trail here. No one will be out there. When you go in a mile, you can turn and go down this obvious canyon, Smithwater Canyon, cross country. Halfway down, you'll get to a dry fall kind of thing. Don't go down that by yourself, but you've still got a good area you can explore for wildlife. Or you could drive this road here. This area by Covington Flat has some of our biggest Joshua trees. So I'm not a tall Joshua tree, but big, full featured Joshua trees that are tall, and you'll have this to yourself. Those are some goods. those are some possibilities.
Okay. Next question. What are the best beginning backpacking areas of the park? If people are time limited or they want to do some training or they want to just take a basic backpack themselves or with family, what are the best like overnight areas and beginning backpacking areas in the park?
So the California Riding and Hiking Trail out of Juniper Flats is a good beginning area. And when I had the trail for Stubby Springs, I can get to that. Okay, so here's Juniper Flats. Here, if you take the turnoff trail for Stubby Springs and you go down it, and this will help if you have a geo-referenced map, but right in this area, there's a really nice campsite. So I've camped here multiple times for both local outing and national outing trips. You can actually see this rock formation pretty easily from this spot right here, which is a bit of an overlook. This is a nice spot actually for lunch or a break. You get a nice view of all the rocks by Hidden Valley. And then you can see this rock formation quite readily. That's a good spot to camp. You can get here. This is very easy walking. Be great for young children or people who are beginning backpackers and are just getting used to it and want an easy walk. You can camp here. Then you can day hike over to Stubby Springs, maybe Fan Canyon and come back. Or you can go back to the top here. Or you can climb Quail Mountain. So those are two good day hiking options from there. Another good option is to, if you have a Subaru, is to start from Covington Flats and backpack the riding and hiking trail in this area.
Nice.
Yeah, there's another variation that's possible here. You can if you have multiple vehicles, we do this on organized trips. We'll park vehicles here with packs in them, and then people actually day hike over from Black Rock along the riding and hiking trail, and then they pick up their packs and their water and their food, and then there's some camping over in this area. It makes an easy start, and then the next day you come over to the campsite that I just mentioned, and then you can come out at Juniper Flats, and that's like a 2-night trip.
That's great. That's a great trip. Or just in one night and a turnaround. That's really nice.
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, switching to more family non-backpacking pursuits. What are the best picnic areas and what are the best group car camping sites for a large group?
Yeah. So the prettiest picnic area is at Hidden Valley.
Okay.
It's also a popular trailhead. But when I'm trail roving out in the park and I'm going to take a lunch break, I usually go to Hidden Valley because A, I can interact with people, which is part of trail roving, but B, it has some shade, so that's a nice option. Quail Springs is a nice picnic area as well. If you go in a little further, like from the parking lot, if you just go north 20 yards, 30 yards, there's some more picnic tables, and those sometimes have shade. And if people want to watch the rock climbers, we don't like people gawking too much at the rock climbers on the theory it makes them nervous. I don't know how true that really is, but there's normally rock climbing training going on there. So that can be interesting if people want to that might entertain some of the younger kids who are fascinated by that.
Okay.
I haven't tried a lot of the other picnic areas. As much as I like Split Rock as a hike, the picnic area there, it's just picnic tables in a parking lot in full sun. So it's not super attractive. I believe Live Oak is prettier, but I've not been there. And then another pretty picnic area is down here in Indian Cove.
Yes.
This picnic area here, I was going to include a picture here, but I didn't. This is super rocky. You're at one end of Rattlesnake Canyon and it has really interesting rock formations.
Dave, what about best group car camping site? What would you recommend?
So Sheep Pass, I think, is the best. And again, this one is hard to get. So this one is 6 months to the minute. Try to get Sheep's Pass or have flexible days. I'm usually trying to get it because I've scheduled a trip a year in advance and I've locked in my days, and so I'm limited to those days. What Marianne Ruiz does for the chapter trips that she leads here is she gets the campground first, then she picks the days. So if you have flexible days, then Sheep Pass should work, and that's the best place to be.
Oh, FYI, we went out there for the very tail end of, I think it was the Geminids, the meteor shower a couple of months ago. It was right after, I guess, that 3 mile line. We went in at night. There was absolutely no line. We went to Sheep's Pass. There was nobody there. And there was the most beautiful, huge owl that our headlights disturbed. And then we just parked and we stargazed, and it was completely empty. So, that time of the season, midweek, a couple months ago, nobody was there. So that's kind of a good time. Anyway, further questions. Is it recreation.gov or reservation.gov? The website.
I think it's recreation.gov.
Recreation. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Can you talk a bit about the deserted? Oh, I missed a question further up. What is the Hall of Horrors?
So the Hall of Horrors is primarily a rock climbing area. I have not personally explored this area. I really should. There are some climber trails there. Maybe someone may want to weigh in who knows this area better. There are some climber trails there. There's like a little tunnel you can crawl through. I don't send people there from the visitor center because it's not an organized trail, and for that reason, I haven't gotten around to exploring it. I think it's a fun area. I think people like it, but you'll be exploring rather than being guided around a straightforward trail system.
Got it. Can you say a bit about the deserted east end of the park?
See where I had the view of that. So this is the Eagle Mountains are here. They're really pretty mountains. They're very sort of jagged and sharp. So those are, I think, intriguing. And then we also have the Coxcomb Mountains. Let's see if any of that is labeled here. It's not. The organization that would take you hiking in those areas would be Desert Survivors. Desert Survivors. It's a conservation organization out of Oakland. If you know Lisa Sanford, she does some hikes with them, or is getting started in doing that. So Desert Survivors is probably a .org, and see if they are leading any hikes in that area.
Okay.
It's all non-trailed, cross-country, topo maps, route finding. It's an area that not easily set up for visitors.
And with that, Dave, we have several very laudatory remarks thanking you for a wonderful talk. So I think that's the end of our chat questions. Anybody else that has a question, enter it in the chat. But what a wonderful talk, Dave. Thank you so much. I did get another question. Is it possible for you to do another talk like this on Anza Borrego?
So I am not very up to speed on Anza Borrego. If you go back a couple of years, I was outings chair for the Big Bear group, and we figured that people from Big Bear were not going to get as far east as Anza Borrego, and I didn't focus on learning the area. So I'm not. I really, as in my new role as outings chair for Tahquitz, which is actually where I live in the Coachella Valley, I really need to learn that area, but I'm not currently very well informed on it. If you are specifically interested in Anza Borrego, one option which you might not have thought of, might not obvious, would be to check out National Outings. National Outings does run some trips in Anza Borrego. I believe there's a service trip coming up. So they think about 1 or 2 outings a year in Anza Borrego from National Outings. So in the short term, that would be your best place to go. Long term, I really do need to learn the area.
Got it. Well, with that, I think that wraps our questions, but thank you for a really informative talk, Dave. This was just so chock full of information. I love it. I just love this.
Great. Glad it was good.
So helpful and useful. So you're definitely coming back, Dave. So thank you.
You're welcome.